Sharks in the pool, that is not cool. I need the tools, take me to school. Feet first into this league, me first, that cannot be. Under the underdog, Monica G. Feeling a whole lot better suddenly. I get in with it, winning again. You're 1 and 2 in the bag, and I'm going for 3. That is the beat down. God of the best, so I keep. Now, y'all treading water for weeks. Now I'm the shark, so I eat. Now, look, I am not sorry. I understood the pump from which I started. And navigating these drafts is cathartic. So, thanks for the invite to party, yeah. Dynasty Underdog, bite down. Up at the day and the night. Now, easy as flying a kite. Now, come take a look at it right now. Dynasty Underdog, bite down. Up at the day and the night. Now, easy as flying a kite. Now, come take a look at it right now.
Here we go, folks. Episode 150 of Dynasty Underdog. I don't know if the stream's catching up to me or not, but hopefully it is. Got your eye here with me. And for this milestone episode, super stoked to bring in returning guest. Been a while, but Kevin Coleman of Football Guys of the Devy Royals. You can catch him on Twitter if that's your thing at DuBois_22. How have you been, Kevin, man? What's been up?
Oh, I'm good. I've been good, man. Just enjoying the summer and, just the content grind and hanging out. But yeah, as always, I appreciate coming on with you guys. I respect you guys a lot, and you guys do good work. So I'm happy to be here.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's nice having you back on. So nice to see you grow since the last time you were here. And episode 150. We didn't even know if we'd make it that far, and obviously having you on was not planned. But hey, it's nice to have you here for that milestone.
Yeah, that's a lot. 150 is a lot, boys.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. So anything special you've been working on lately for whether it's Football Guys or Devy Royals? Like, what have you been dropping? What content are you focusing on during this off season?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we did since the last time we came on, we kind of started our own Patreon and for the Devy Royale, and it's been a growth process. Everybody has a fucking Patreon. Sorry, I don't know if I can pass, but everybody's got one.
No, you can't.
And so for us, it was one of those processes is we just want to build something kind of cool and whatever. If 5 people sign up, that'd be cool or whatever. And so, it started with a manifesto that we do. It's like 400 pages long on Devy content. We break down all the Devy conferences and stuff like that. And it's kind of morphed itself into now we have Dynasty Devy combined rankings. We rank over 200 players per position in Devy and Dynasty. And we have our own sheets, and we have, Jay Stein's in there doing analytical profiles. So it's kind of become a cool little community, not a huge one. We're really trying to make a push right now. We got 20 more patrons to go to 200. And that's been kind of something that a goal of ours this summer. And so that's been cool. And just kind of working on that, doing stuff with Football Guys. I mean, that's where in reality, I make a lot of my money. I don't make a lot of it from the Patreon. It's just kind of a cool side thing. But then other than that, we actually went mainstream for the first time for a college football show on Football Guys. They never had a college football show. They actually hired us in the fall to do that. And that was really cool to kind of do. So that's been fun and, just grinding away at trying not to get, canceled on social media.
That's easier said than done, huh?
It is. You got to be careful out there in the streets. You got to be careful.
I'm lucky I live on the West Coast, so I'm sure 90% of my tweets never get seen.
That's the goal. That's the goal, that most of them don't get seen, right? You hope at least. No.
I think Billy's got a little bit of lag here. So, Ossie, what is your process on Devy prospect evaluation?
I might be frozen here.
Yeah. So my process. So Devy's a tough one. I would say this, it's when you're evaluating college kids, a lot can happen, and we've seen that with Zach Evans and Keyshawn Boutte and Kyron Williams and a lot of these guys that people have touted pretty high. And I think what it is it takes time. I think each position's different, so I'll say that quarterback position, there's things you're going to look at, and for my process, it's changed a lot from I'm a very film-based guy. Sorry about that. I know Uriah is not necessarily a film guy, but I like film. But what I've actually done over the last year is I've hooked up with Jay Stein who does a lot of our analytical profiles, but he also works for Football Guys now too. And he really made me actually like, all right, I'm going to go into your process. You show me what you work on. So now my process consists of both. And looking at like, okay, so quarterbacks, what are we looking for? I tend to avoid the position altogether in Devy, except for the top guys. I don't go after those guys. Running backs, if you're not 205, I don't like you very much. You're just looking at the process, especially the younger guys. Wide receivers, I tend to hit on wide receivers a little bit more than most. Like I had Waddle as my wide receiver 2 coming out, Jefferson wide receiver 2. Like I've had guys like that. And for me, freshman production, did they have it? Okay, where are they at context wise? Size, I think, is one thing that we need to switch a little bit. We're starting to see smaller guys now get drafted in the first round. So I think we got to, adjust our process there. And then tight ends don't matter. But generally speaking, like those 3 positions, like quarterback, you want to try to avoid. Running back, there's measurables, 5'10", 205. Non-power 5 guys I tend to stay away from. They're always great when they hit, but I like group of 5 guys. Give me, Alabama, Oklahoma, those type of prospects. And then, wide receiver, same thing. You're just looking for the power 5 high producers, and then maybe the skills that translate, Waddle, speed, those type of things.
So how important is
So
like 4-star, 5-star recruit, that type of deal?
Oh, I mean, that's very important. A guy that I really like, and you guys might know Travis May, like his process that he has. He dives into like the 4-5-star. He has a whole analytical model. It's way too complicated for my simpleton mind. But when you look at it, 4-5-star, that's what hits, and that's what you look at. I mean, there's always those 3-star kids, and I think from my perspective, there's a lot of 3-star running backs that hit. And the reason why that is some of these guys are like in Ohio and Louisiana and some of these smaller states for recruiting purposes, and they don't get the stars necessarily. So like that's where you look at like the 5'10", 220. This kid's 5'10", 220, but he's a 3-star. But dude, this kid can move on tape. Okay, then you're looking at your process and you're going to look at it from that perspective. But yeah, 5-star quarterback, 5-star wide receiver, that's generally speaking where you want to look first. And then you go through the measurements and you see kind of, okay, now where are these outliers at?
Are you okay looking out to like the 2026 class and those freshman players, or are you looking more to get guys who may be able to contribute to your team a little bit sooner? I think a lot of people like to focus on the 2024 or 2025 class and get, see if they can get those guys to produce for their team. Sometimes I think you can get an advantage by looking a little further out. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, I think that for me, when I go into drafts or wherever the case may be, when you're in your Devy drafts, you just take best player available no matter the class, because the way that you have to look at Devy and you look at Devy assets is that they're all tradable assets. You can't look at it like, don't look at your roster and be like, man, I need a quarterback. Let me take this guy. Okay, well, that's how you end up with Sam Howell going in the 5th round. Like, yeah, it might be your best asset. Like maybe it is. But you have to be very careful with that. So yeah, you tend to, for me, I just take best player available. And I think that's why when you look in the 3rd round right now, drafts, I've been diving into it a little bit. There's a lot of really good freshmen in that 3rd round. There's a kid named Justice Haynes from Alabama. He's going like late 3rd. He might be the running back one in the class. There's other guys going ahead of him that are a little older, but may not have that same profile. And I think that's where you get into like, who would you rather have? Well, I'd rather have the 5-star freshman that could be the running back one of his class, because next year he's probably going to get drafted in the 1st round. So you just increase your value by 2 rounds instead of drafting maybe that 3rd-year running back who had 700 yards last year in the SEC, and you're hoping. Like, I don't like to do hope. I like to do, value, and that's how you value-based draft. So, yeah, take best player available, go after it. I don't look – and in reality, when I'm in Devy leagues, I don't keep a lot of my Devy assets. I trade them a lot. Like, that's just how I look at it. I trade, and I try to actually win the league. I know it's a crazy concept, winning a league in fantasy football, but that's what I try to do.
Hey, we preach that all the time here. Just
what the hell are you doing? Trying to win a league. Come on, man.
Yeah.
I love the Justice Haynes shout, by the way. I snagged him at the 301 in a Devy startup like a month or so ago. So, yeah, I love those profiles, those guys looking out to 2026, trying to grab the guys.
Well, hey man, let's talk about the Cowboys now. It's a shame Billy's lagging behind here because this is Devy content, and me and Billy, we started a Devy team about, I think we're going to our 4th year now. We started our first Dynasty League the year before, and someone came into our chat was, hey, we're going to do a Devy. And I was very interested in doing it, but I didn't want to do it alone. So I remember in the group chat, I was like, hey, I'll hop in here if someone wants to join in with me. And Billy's like, hey, I'll do it. And that's how we met in, the first place. So, but I can't think of a single Devy selection that we've made that has really stuck yet. So I'm just like, maybe I'm not doing my research. Maybe I'm not doing what I need to do. But Billy's definitely a few more Devy leagues than I am now. And so it would be nice if his stream would catch up so he could talk a little bit more about this. But maybe tell us a little bit about your Devy startup strategy. What the difference is between like a supplemental draft, and I guess for me, like, how do you value like a Devy first round pick versus a Dynasty first round pick? Kind of a rule of thumb I've always done is like, hey, if it's a Devy first, that's kind of like a Dynasty second, or kind of basic. Like, how do you look at it?
Yeah, so I always get that question, so I'm glad you brought it up. Like, so the values to me, if it's a depleted rookie first, so it's only rookies ever, I kind of look at it a little bit like the top 5 in those first round. I do look at it as like a mid first almost, because there's always those dudes that fall through the cracks. Like Javonte Williams is a big one. That he was going 101 and 102 in depleted drafts a few years ago. Zach Wilson, even though he, whoops. But he was still going 101 or 102 in those drafts. So when you're looking at it from that standpoint, I look at it almost like a mid first for the depleted, and then it drops off pretty significant. So like if you think you can get in that top 5 area, I still think a mid first to like late first is a value. And then after like at the 106, probably early second. So then you just kind of go back at like about a half, like you're looking at 6 picks, kind of differential there. In Devy first, to me, though, I still value him pretty much just like a first in like a regular dynasty because of the freshman and the value you can still get for the freshman, and people always want to buy into it. And if you're in Devy leagues, people think that they're much smarter than they are. So do I. So like, it's not just like everybody
we
out
all do.
there. So we all think we can get that 101 in that first round, and we could change our team and our mindset. So like, there's still value to be had in those areas. So yeah, you're still valuing those Devy first as like rookie first in terms of like value there. Even if it's depleted, because those freshmen coming in, people always get freshman hype. The quarterbacks in the 26 class, people love them and they're going after them hard. So, and knowing that too, knowing where the value is. So for example, next year, I'm already on next year's research for those of you guys listening. So 2027 class, the wide receivers are loaded. It's a loaded wide receiver class. So just know going into it, like there's 5 or 6 guys that people are going to really go after in that class. And then probably like Dylan Raiola is going to Georgia. He's probably going to go to 101 mark because he's a quarterback that is just absolutely phenomenal. So it's going to be value. Like I would imagine that first next year in Devy are going to be way more valuable than they are this year because the running back class is kind of down, whereas the running back class next year is pretty up. So it's going to be interesting to see that. So just know next year, those first are going to be a little bit more valuable.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so talking a little bit about the supplemental drafts, right? And I'm interested in this because I've kind of listened to a lot of Devy pods and whatnot doing kind of supplemental mocks and all that. And there's obviously a lot of incoming rookies that are still in there, right? And so how do you kind of judge when you're going to go after one of those versus pick up, a 5-star freshman instead of going for Dalton Kincaid, let's say, right? Who's like all the hot rage right now. That's something I struggle with. I feel like a good bit because I almost always lean unless I see like the final piece to my competing rosters right there. I almost always go for the more liquid Devy asset that I feel I can gain value. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard, man. That's what I love about the format, because like, and then you're gonna second guess yourself for the rest of your life too. Like you remember when you took Dalton Kincaid over Bijan or whatever the case may be, like whoever the Bijan of the freshman class is. What I would say is this: I think that last point you made was the most important. know where your team's at, and honestly know where your team's at. Because a lot of our teams are like, yeah, we're going to win it. No, you're not. You're going to go you're going to finish at 107 and you're going to be in the middle of the pack again. So like, there's a cool resource. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's new. It's called Dynasty Daddy. It's a funny name, but it's really good resource actually. And you can actually go in there and it's free. And I always like free because I'm broke as shit and a teacher. So like, yeah, I go free here, and it actually evaluates your roster really well. And you can kind of see where you're at. It will tell you if you're a fraud, a pretender, or a contender. And like, I've been using it this offseason. It's pretty good. I mean, everything has nuance to it. Everything has context. It's not perfect, but so like when I go into it, okay, I know that I need this position. Will it take me over the top? Like, is that the area that I do? I will say this though. It is very hard for me to take like a Dalton Kincaid over a 5-star running back in Devy because the running backs tend to have the most value. So you're thinking Singleton, Henderson, Bijan, those guys. And in this year, it's really hard for me to take like, Tajay Spears over Zachariah Branch from USC. Super hard for that because the value wise. So like to your point, yeah, I'm not doing that. I will take Zachariah Branch. And then here's the thing though, I will take some second and third round picks in my Devy. So if we're sitting there, I will look for the value in guys that really like, and this is what I do because I'm just a degenerate. I have profile builds on every league mate that I have. So like, especially in Devy. So if Uriah, if I know he likes freshman wide receivers with a certain profile, if I draft that kid in the second round, but Uriah also has like Derrick Henry, I know that if I'm a contender, I might be able to do a flip at some point in the season for Derrick Henry if his NFL's team's not doing well. So like you have to keep profiles. Like that's the dynasty profile thing is I do, but Devy profile is even more important because you need to know tendencies of your Devy league mates and what they want and what they look for. Cause I call them just essentially the no Devy guys. So the ones that just are in a Devy league, but they trade all their Devy picks. They don't like Devy picks. They just go after the veterans. You got to know those guys. Cause you need to understand that like, hey, if you want to kind of target, rebuild, and understand, you got to be set the market first with that guy. Go get his Devy pick early. As soon as that league rolls over, baby, you better go. You better go now because he's going to trade it. So I think that's the other way too to kind of give you a competitive edge. Knowing like how your league mates draft and what they look for will allow you to extract value during your supplemental draft, because then you can take those supplemental picks and move them around, and you can basically have targets already. So if I draft that kid in the second round, I know Uriah is going to want later, I can put a little U next to that kid's name on my sheet and know that, hey, I know he likes this kid. I know it. I've seen him tweet about him. I know that. I keep all my league mates' tweets and shit too. Like we go deep in this, like, and that's how you can extract value. But to answer your point, yeah, you want to take the most valuable player unless you're that piece away that you feel like it's going to put you over the top. But for me, like running backs is hard because Tajay Spears is great, but you can find Aaron Jones right now, who is not any running back over 26 is dead to most people, especially in Devy. These are the cheapest freaking assets you can go acquire. Like right after the NFL season, everybody wants to get rid of these guys. So that's the way to kind of look at it, I think. And then you just extract value, keep your profiles, do all of it.
Yeah, I love that. I actually had a trade where I moved Jimmy Garoppolo for like a 111 in a Devy supplemental, and I got Zachariah Branch, and I got some crap for it about like, oh, I don't know if that was, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that was the plus value move there, plus EV move. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in kind of being able to get into those spots. I don't think people value Devys necessarily correctly still to this day. I'm looking at a tweet of yours real quick. I just wanted to touch on this. You said, if I could teach new managers one thing about Devy format, it's to be very careful using consensus Devy rankings. And I want just to kind of get your, deeper thoughts on that a little bit, why that would be.
So, in reality, there's not that many that do Devy rankings that put them out there. So you should just know that. Like, there's a lot of guys that will have them, but they don't necessarily put them out there for some type of edge or whatever the edge is going to be. And here's the thing. So, and there's kind of clicks within like where the rankings come from. So if you're in like Ray GQ's Discord, and if he's high on a certain player, that player is going to be higher in the rankings. But then everybody that's only in Ray's Discord, they're going to love that player. That's just how it works. in my Discord, I'm we really like Jackson Arnold in the Oklahoma quarterback, a 5-star kid. We probably have him ranked the highest out of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So for mine, in our consensus rankings, Jackson's going to be a little higher. So the way I try to like really preach to people is, go look at everybody's rankings and don't use like I saw Fantasy Pros maybe put some out today. They have Nick Singleton listed twice. So I don't know which Nick Singleton you like the best, either Nick or Nicholas, but they're both in there. So be careful with those. And so the way I look at it is like, you don't want consensus rankings are bullshit anyway, because these kids, look how many people miss on Zach Evans. I was one of them. I like Zach Evans. I thought he was talented, but he just didn't get the draft capital. And consensus wise, he was going 109. Sean Tucker was going 111. Some people had Sean Tucker as a running back too. Consensus in Devy circles. So the way you have to approach it is you have to do a little research yourself. Like, we can help you, and I'll put up my rankings for free. I don't give a shit. Like, you can look at my stuff, but I'm not going to be right either all the time. And so the best way to look at Devy, you can use rankings, but it's a value game. Everything's a value game with Devy. Like that's more game theory than Dynasty. So you really have to look at, all right, projection wise, Blake Corum is in some people's Devy rankings still. For me, Blake Corum's a do not draft, because I don't necessarily see, he's a Michigan running back, him being able to have a legitimate draft capital at the NFL. Maybe he does. Maybe he gets second round. But to me, he's projected third round right now. So you just have to be very careful. And then with Devy consensus rankings, some of them are just really behind, right? Like updating your rankings for Devy, I see a lot that are like a month or two behind, and it happens quick. It moves. So just know, just be very careful with where those consensus rankings are coming from. Always get multiple. So like what we do on our Patreon, we have combined for all of us that contribute the rankings. So you can actually go into mine or Christian's or Jay's or Jeff's rankings and see where we have it. And then our combined is next to it too. So you kind of get a consensus plus, hey, maybe like I trust Christian more in this, running back area or whatever the case, or hey, Kevin does well with wide receivers. And that way you can get the whole picture, because I think the biggest thing we see a lot of is like everybody thinks they're smarter than everybody. And in reality, in Devy, Dynasty's the same way, but in Devy, we're guessing a lot of the time. We're trying to take educated guesses, and we do our best with our models and profiles and all that. But consensus rankings to me is, it's a tough game out there right now. And you have to just be very careful where you get your information from. Not saying anybody's bad. It's just, I think also, and you see this too, you see this in Dynasty, websites will love a player. So every year it's I don't know, it's Justin Ross. For some reason, Justin Ross is that guy on social media. And so a group will get that Justin Ross take, and then you see groupthink with that whole kid, right? That happens in Devy too. So you have to be very careful. And that's the one thing I'm proud of with us is we don't agree really at all. Me and Christian are always fighting, always. We are what are you talking about, bro? And we have bets all the time and stuff. And that's what I'd say, because I think new people to the format, and you already talked about, if you miss, it sucks and you don't want to play anymore. It's I don't want to keep missing. This isn't fun to me. So limiting your misses is just going on your own gut and trusting yourself a little bit. Because I'll be honest, the first time that I got into a college fantasy league, I used rankings from somebody else and I finished dead last. And I was like, okay, not doing this again, because I literally went off their college rankings and it didn't work. So then the next year, last year, or 2 years ago, I did my own CFF. Now this is just straight CFF. I did my own CFF rankings and I won 2 best ball leagues. And it's because I was able to put in the time and the work. And so that's what it really means.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate that breakdown of that. Okay, so I wanted to throw a little curveball at you. I saw this one as well. I saw you I'm really against strong running back builds right now. I'm not really into the current running back landscape in Dynasty, but you can take this to Devy or Dynasty, whichever way you want. But I saw you kind of say that bully tight end is still a viable strategy, and I want to know how you see kind of applying that, because I haven't quite seen in practice that working, at least this year.
Bully tight end or bully running back? Did you mean running back? I think you meant running back.
Oh, sorry, bully running back. I think if I said tight end, I didn't mean to, but bully running back, yes.
Yeah. No, so it's just, so for me, it's just something that I've been looking at. So for example, in a draft right now I'm looking at the bully running back draft that someone is going through. He took McCaffrey in the 3rd, ETN in the 4th, and Eckler in the 5th. That's pretty damn good in a PPR league, getting those 3 guys. And then, so his quarterbacks, so when you're looking at his quarterbacks, he's got Bryce, and then he also got CeeDee Lamb and Saquon Barkley in that league. So he's got 4 running backs that he's going for it. And then with Lamb and he's got Bryce. Now the quarterbacks are the problem. He probably's got to get a veteran guy here in a little bit and kind of, extract that value. I think it can be done. The key is, I think you have to mix young and old. So you got McCaffrey, ETN. So right there, Eckler, and you also have to get that profile back that can catch passes that has 2 to 3 years. And I think we also need to get out of a mindset in Dynasty. It's a 3-year intervals. Most Dynasty leagues don't even last 3 years, right, boys? Like that usually doesn't happen. But like if they do, you can still do 2 years and retool. And like I mentioned earlier, like you can still go get some of these, like you can still retool. But the only way this strategy works is if you're as active as hell on the Dynasty market as much as you can, because you gotta ship these guys. Like, okay, hey, McCaffrey's hitting his peak. I'm going for it next year. I might have to tear down a little bit as a wide receiver. I'm gonna go trade him for that 3rd-year breakout wide receiver that I believe in. And it might not be perfect, but the idea is bully running back. You do it early, you win the 1st year, and then you retool and you start kind of building through that. And I think it can be done. I've tested it a couple times. We'll see. I know the in vogue thing is to go wide receivers and quarterbacks, and that's how you do it. And that's not a bad strategy. It's how everybody's kind of building. But I just think it can be done. I think that there's ways that you can do it if you're active, because there's so many good values right now. Like Eckler in the 5th is ridiculous, in my opinion. Like in PPR, full PPR, that's kind of ridiculous.
Hey, just going back to your dubbing rankings real quick, just because it means something to me, because we had just drafted Nick Singleton last year during our Devy rookie draft. I don't even know what you call it, rookie draft. I don't know, Devy draft.
Yeah.
And I seen rankings this year where Nick Singleton's like really fallen quite a bit. Like what caused him to fall? Did he fall in your rankings, or is this like one of those also cautionary tales of paying attention to whose rankings you're looking at? Because I'm not going to mention whose I was looking at, but I showed it to Billy and he was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't trust this guy's rankings in the first place.
Yeah, so like the thing with Singleton, where I think some people are, what do I want to say? I think they're a little concerned because his teammate Katron Allen is really good. So when you're looking at like Katron and what he can do, I think that they're kind of taking that into play of like, oh, hey, his running back might be, his teammate might be a little bit better than him. As far as him and my rankings for Singleton, like I had Singleton, he's my running back 2 overall still, like, and just based on talent. I will say this is overall the running back landscape for Devy right now is disgusting. Because there's a lot of dudes like we don't have a Bijan or a Brees. We're not having that right now. So a lot of it is all like this is probably the first year I haven't seen us have like a consensus running back 1. Like Travion Henderson is up there, Singleton, Judkins, Sanders, those type of guys. But there's a big like where does the other guys come from? So I could see why Singleton maybe be a little bit low, but it's hard for me not to put a guy like Singleton in that top 5 category based on his profile, his speed, his size, everything that he does well. He's got to improve his inside running. He's got to improve kind of getting that volume because he didn't get that last year. But yeah, that's the thing. Like now, here's the thing. That guy might be right? Next year, we might be talking about, damn, Singleton, like he did not pan out. So you never want to say anything's wrong. But from a value standpoint, I'll tell you what, and this is why it's imperative to do like some mocks or just check out any mocks. Like we do mocks almost every other week on our YouTube channel, because it doesn't necessarily matter where someone ranks somebody. It's where he's getting drafted in those mocks, because that'll tell you the value of him. And right now he's going at 106 running back 2. So that's how he's getting valued in Devy. So at least the value's there, and you can kind of compare your rankings that way to where, okay, I know now that might be because of consensus and everything, but that doesn't necessarily matter, because if people are drafting there, you can trade them for that.
Excellent.
Yeah, no, that's great information. So I kind of I was going to pull up some screenshots, but please, if my computer's acting this way, there's no point in doing it. But I did want to look ahead to 2024 just a little bit.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of looking at the 23 class, right? And kind of how it turned into a pumpkin, essentially. Like just, it was this highly sought after class. And then all of a sudden we get here in 2023 and it's like really ugly. So is there anything we can take away from what happened in the 2023 class looking at the 2024 class?
Yeah. So what I would say is like, I'm not as like pumpkin-y on the 23 class. I think there still is value there. I think that what ended up happening was two of the top, well, Tucker too, 3 of the top 10 picks fell off the face of the earth. Zach Evans, Tucker, and Keyshawn Boutte. And that's always going to tend to happen sometimes. And people forget Quentin Johnson, like the first 4 weeks of the season, that dude disappeared. Like people were worried about him. Even I think he had like 6 catches the first 4 weeks, and like he wasn't there either. So we got really nervous. The biggest takeaway I could say is like, this is why in Devy, if you do play Devy, this is why necessarily trading those assets and moving them is the best, strategy. But even in like the rookie drafts next year, I'm going to tell everybody like this class is good. It could be great if the running backs hit, but the running backs might not hit. So like when you're looking at like Henderson coming off the injury, did not look great. Raheem Sanders, I like Raheem. He's produced, but is he a 3-down kid with receiving ability? I don't know. And like, what's his athleticism look like? Will Shipley from Clemson. Athleticism is a big one. I think he can catch, but will he is he going to test well? Braylon Allen, that dude would probably be the 101 if he was an edge, but he's a running back. So like, what are we going to do with Braylon Allen moving forward? So like the 24 class right now has 2 quarterbacks that I think are top 5. Drake May, he's still got to develop. Then you have the wide receivers. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is in a class above himself. Like that kid's a baller. And then even after wide receiver 1, Emeka Egbuka and some of these other guys, like they're nice, but I wouldn't consider them like can't miss prospects. So if you're even looking at the draft right now, I really think there's 2 guys, Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., that I'm very comfortable projecting as being very good. Like, okay, NFL level talent players. These other guys, they got some work to do. And I think that's something to know. Like if you have a late 24 first, if you depending on what the NFL talent you can get, I wouldn't hate shipping it right now. Now, there's some guys that can pop off. There's Malik Neighbors. There's guys in this. Brock Bowers to the tight end position. Like, I know everybody considers him to be like the top guy. So if you want to throw him in there, you can. But I think just be very like cognitive of like the running back position is going to make or break this class. If they hit, this is going to be a very solid class. Top 10, like, hey, really good. If a couple of these guys fall off, then we're going to be in trouble.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because I do think that is kind of a cautionary tale of the 2023 class is that, don't get too attached to your 24 first, especially if you're a contender type team. If you're up in the top end, obviously you always hold on to those. But if you're a contender type team, I think that you should feel a little more comfortable in seeing what can happen to these classes, especially at the back end, kind of moving those picks we were just talking last week about, ADP, Dynasty ADP versus redraft ADP, picking out some guys who you can target as buys. And there's just some like studs there. You were talking about Derrick Henry is one, Cooper Kupp is one, and I'm seeing them available for a 24 first and maybe a second. And that's a really good price, I think, if you're looking for, that extra piece that's going to provide tons of points for your team short term. So yeah, I love that idea there. That's kind of what I wanted to hone in on. Okay, cool. So who are some players that you find, because you're talking about rankings and talking about values and whatnot, and Devy is wild depending on whose rankings you're looking at. Are there any players that you think you're rightfully higher on than others and maybe lower on than others? You said Blake Corum, and that's one who I actually have seen up at like ranked in, somewhere in the top 15 to 20 Devy players. And yeah, I haven't kind of heard anybody say that he shouldn't be until you just did. So are there any other players kind of like that maybe?
Yeah. So some guys that I think, and again, I just want to emphasize, I'm not better or right more than others. I would just say that like, I'm more risk adverse. I'm just more, I'm more risk averse. Like I really look at prospects and like the big thing that I will say for everybody out there listening, like, I will harp on this every time. Every single one of us knows the good players. You can turn on a box score. Oh, Caleb Williams is really good. If you want to test your mettle and be an analyst, tell me who's not good. That's what you got to tell me. And B, okay, don't draft this guy. And like for us, that's one thing we kind of said, like, we were off on Sean Tucker. We were off on Kyron Williams. We were off on a lot of these guys that because of the profile. So as far as like each position, I see Michael Penix Jr. out there a little bit from Washington. I have questions. That's a 6-year kid. He older prospect because of the injuries that he had in Indiana. Last year was the first year that he really took off at Washington, but then he kind of faltered down the stretch. I've seen some like first round buzz for Michael Penix Jr. from like analysts, not necessarily draft analysts, but like, oh, he can get drafted in the first. Really, to me, any quarterback after May is a non-draft for me. Bo Nix, these other guys, like, yeah, if they hit, great. Even JJ, and I love Michigan, JJ McCarthy. Like, I'm a Michigan fan. JJ, projects to me as coming back his senior year as of now. Now, he might take that next step. I comped him to Matt Stafford coming out of high school, and he does have a lot of analytical profile to Stafford. But are you willing to take that risk in Devy? Because I'm not. So, like, I'll move on from there. The running back position, I tend to be down a little bit on Braylon Allen, a little bit more than most Wisconsin running back. He had terrible film last year. His freshman year was great. And then last year, the numbers looked good, but he was not as efficient. I really question his speed and his long athleticism. What does that look like? And some people have him as the running back 1 of the class. Now, that worries me based on where his draft is and what he can be. Now, this is a huge year for him. New offensive coordinator. They're going to spread it around, won't have the boxes. So I think for me, Braylon Allen's one of those guys that I'm a little bit nervous about. Trey Benson from Florida State is a guy that I'm a little higher on than some. So he's a guy that I don't think the consensus hasn't caught Trey Benson yet. So they, at the beginning, like, Christian started tweeting about him in November, and then we started diving into what he is. And I think there's so many questions about this running back room. Trey could be a top 3 guy in this class pretty easily. Like if he kind of just has another year at Florida State. So for me, Trey's one of those guys to keep your eye on of like, oh, maybe he can do that. Another name for you guys is Jace McClellan. From Alabama. Yep. And I'm only mentioning him because his mom yelled at me on Twitter once, and I want to apologize, Mrs. McClellan.
Yes. Sorry, Mama.
Because I heard like a transfer rumor about him, and I tweeted it out, and she's like, my boy ain't transferring. I'm sorry. All right, Miss McClellan, I'm sorry.
Hey, the source. From the source.
That's how you know you made it.
So she yelled at me, but I think in Alabama, like, I think that he's getting slept on a little bit in the class because good profile, 220, we can really move. And Alabama running backs, they get drafted day 2 capital. Like they do. Like, so those are the guys that kind of look at wide receivers. I would say like Malik Neighbors from LSU. He's got a lot of buzz though. So like he's in that category of like getting a little bit there. And I cannot quit this kid. There's 2. Troy Franklin from Oregon. I love this freaking kid. And it's a California in me because I'm in California. He's from California. But this kid, I watched him play in high school. I can't even quantify it like on anything but just the dude can catch and gets open and he's a dog. Like that's just, he just does that.
He's a dog.
He's a dog. And like, when you're looking at him, like I love what he did. He did last year for Bo Nix. You saw his production really jump up. And in a deep sleeper, his name is J. Michael Sturdivant. He plays at UCLA. He just transferred for Cal. J. Michael, when I look at wide receivers, and to your point earlier in the show, like what do we look at? Go look and see if they played Texas 6A ball. If they did that and produced, these kids can freaking ball. Like that's where JSN comes from. That's where a lot of these kids, they came from. And he did. He balled out in Texas 6A. He went to Cal for some damn reason. I don't know why you go to Cal. If you're a football player, I don't know why you're going to Cal. Did okay last year. Transferred to UCLA, could be their wide receiver 1, should be their wide receiver 1. So he's a name to like look out for. I think J. Michael could maybe kind of get up there athleticism wise and really kind of stand out.
Oh, you gave me some good stuff there. Okay, Texas A ball. I gotta lock that one in and put that one in the database search for sure.
Oh, I got another thing real quick. So this is from my boy Todd Vincent. He's in our Discord. So if he's a degenerate, like a true degenerate. Like I've never met a degenerate like this guy. So what you can
in our community is a good thing. It's a good thing. What among us, it's like when you're calling, you're like, yeah, I am. Come on, give it to me.
He's a recruiting degenerate. degenerate. So what he does is on 247, if you go to athletes and you look at athletes, a lot of those guys, you can't determine what position they're going to play. Well, he's in a lot of leagues that they actually draft high school players. So what he does, if you go into the 247, you go to athlete, look at the recruiter. Google their recruiter. If the recruiter is the wide receiver coach, that kid is going to be playing wide receiver. And if he's the cornerback coach, he's probably playing corner. So this is a kid like Eugene Wilson. He's a deep, deep name for everybody out there. He's a 26 class. He going to Florida. Eugene Wilson was like athlete 22, but no one really knew a lot about him because they thought they didn't really know what position he was going to play. Well, Todd found out the wide receiver coach from Florida was the guy recruiting him. And now Eugene Wilson has popped off into like this sleeper candidate there. So like for you deep divers out there, go look at the position coach that's recruiting these kids and you can find some gems out there.
Yeah, I know there's one that's slipping my mind right now that's like listed as a defensive end or something like that. And he's supposed to be an absolute just alien.
Nichols Harbor.
Yes,
Harbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's similar idea there. Okay, you gave me a ton here, man. But also, by the way, those are the kind of things that I think are super necessary for people to like find out and lock into their brains. Like the Texas A ball thing, like going and looking at the wide receiver, like that stuff it's stuff your league mates probably aren't looking at, a lot of them at least. And so there's a huge advantage in that. But Oregon, you said Oregon. You like Troy Franklin, and he's a good player for sure. How do you feel about the incoming freshman Jurion Dickey?
Yeah, so I comped him to Des Bryant in my comp. Yeah, you're right. I love that one a little bit.
That's some bias there, some homer.
Let's do it.
Sure.
Well, I mean, shit. 247 Sports comp to AJ Brown. I can't comp to an Eagle, so I had to figure something out.
He does kind of.
I know.
Run like that though. He does.
I think Dickey could be really good if he's healthy. And the thing with him is like he was a man amongst boys on his high school tape. It's the funniest shit ever. If you go watch his like huddle tape, he played like corner and like linebacker, and this dude was just trucking these poor little white kids just all over the field, like just like nothing they could do. Like a 5'7" like future insurance salesman, just getting just destroyed by him.
I feel seen.
I think when you look at him, I think over the middle, like the things that he can do, like yak ability. If he can get on the field this year, I think he can be really special. Like they have a really very solid wide receiver room, and he wasn't there in the spring. He's kind of recovering from that injury, and then he was finishing up high school. So he's going to be a little behind there. So that's something to note, but I like him. I think I have my wide receiver 3 in my class, or 4. I think I have him 4 because I have Jonte Cook for Texas at 3, Zachariah Branch. And then I have now you put on my spot. I can't remember. But yeah, I have those guys, Branch. Oh, Dickey. Yeah, I have Dickey at 2. And then Mekhi Lemon in there with Jonte Cook. So they're in that category.
I had a team where I got both Branch and Dickey in like
perfect
3rd, 4th round or something like that. And I'm just like, I'm honestly like, I'm a sucker for 2026 5-star recruit. Like, and 2026, any freshman 5-star recruit, it just feels like you have a lot of liquidity there. So I just, I love those guys. So I want to know, you talked a lot about, guys like Trey Benson, just running backs in general. I love any FSU running back, by the way, has a really strong chance of being a productive NFL player. They just do. For some reason, they go there and they're studs. But I haven't heard a lot of talk about Branson Robinson. And Uriah and I had the supplemental draft for our Devy league. He ended up falling to – and there's not – like there's some pretty heady players in this league. Like this isn't a bunch of schlubs. He fell to the end of the 2nd round, and I was kind of like shocked. Why is Branson Robinson falling to the end of the 2nd round when I've seen him up in like the top 10 of overall Devy rankings and rankings, whatever. But how do you feel about Branson Robinson, and why does it feel like he's taking a tumble of sorts?
He's a big boy, our boy Branson Robinson. When I'm looking at the class, he's my running back 3 of the class, but that's because he has Singleton and Judkins ahead of him. So like realistically, yeah. I that's probably a product of the depth chart at Georgia, just because I think he's going to be a running back by committee there if everybody stays healthy. I think when you're looking at Georgia's running back room, Kendall Milton's still there, and people forget Kendall Milton was a very high producer in high school, and he just hasn't been out there. Dejon Edwards is going to get run because that's just what they do. They like those small backs to catch passes. But I think Branson's running back 3. Now, I think he can take over, though. That's the thing, though. This is Devy. Like, if you're taking Branson at the end of the 1st, you're probably nervous. You're taking Branson in a second. You're like, shit, he could be the running back of Georgia, and now I'm going to expect the value, right? So that's the value play. Like, I really think that Branson's ranking right now or drop is really because two things. People fall in love with freshman quarterbacks. Like Malachi Nelson going at 110 is going to push down some of these guys. And then like some of these other freshman quarterbacks will push them down. And in a product of like, well, when's he going to get on the field rather than I'm going to take the best overall talent. So when I was going through, I just did a mock. I did it kind of so I can show you guys too. Where did Branson go? Branson went, so Branson didn't go to the third round of this mock, 304. And running backs that went ahead of him, Will Shipley, Donovan Edwards, Cedric Baxter Jr. So in that area, and for me, like looking at that, it's like, well, I'd probably take Branson a little higher than Cedric Baxter. I know Cedric Baxter is considered consensus running back 1, but this running back class is probably worse than last year's class where Branson was like top 2. So I don't know what we're doing there in terms of like, how are we looking at value? It's like the new shiny toy. Oh, I can get this freshman running back. So that's probably Branson. Yeah, that's probably Branson's. And that's why that second, third round is so money. Like, I love the third round. Like, anytime I'm in Devy drafts, I try to trade back as much as I can to get in that third round because there's so much value to be had in those third round. And you can kind of win on that NFL side with some assets. But yeah, I think that's what Branson's at. Just fatigue. Where's he going to play? But he should be the dominant guy in that room, next year for sure. And then this year, if he gets out there, then you have a value, you have equity.
Okay, so now I'm just like throwing shit at you because I feel like it. You're talking about the third round, and I haven't heard a lot about this player either, and young player. But you know anything about Reuben Owens, running back, Texas A&M? And I just haven't heard much about him. Is this a guy that we should keep on our radar, or is he like, we don't care about this guy?
Well, I got yelled at by his dad in my DMs as well. So we're just going down father train here.
You really made it, bro. You've really made it.
I purposely so when I do this shit, like I purposely I try not to tweet about anybody because I know their families all like watch. So I actually did a YouTube video and his dad found my YouTube video and messaged me on social media. But it wasn't like a bad conversation. So like, it wasn't like there. So Reuben Owens to me. So like, this is all said with like, listen, like he's the running back 3 for me right now in the class. This running back class is down though. Like, it's not like a very like, oh my gosh, you got to get a hands on these guys. He produced like last year, 25 rushing touchdowns his senior year, like almost 2,000 yards, I believe, like 1,800. I think for me, from a production standpoint, he checks the box. He's pretty explosive at the line of scrimmage, and he can kind of do that, makes guys miss. Pretty good lateral agility as well. I think the problem for me is he's going to freaking Texas A&M, and why we've seen a Devin a chain in these guys, that offense, like, and it's going to be a 3-headed monster out there. I think him and Moss and damn, I can't think of the name of the other guy on that team. But those 3 guys on that roster right now, they're going to definitely be a running back by committee. And they've already talked about that in the spring. So he's got to really step up and kind of like take a hold of that room. And he's not a really good receiver. I don't think he had more than 100 yards receiving in his career in high school. I have to check on that, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't have that profile. So to me, like, that's my concern with him. And in drafts right now where his value is at, like, he's going okay. So he's going in that like third-ish round, like late third, early fourth. So like, if you can get him there and you believe he's a top 3 kid, great. Like, I'll take that all day. It just really depends on the value. That's my question mark for him. But his dad wanted me to let everybody know that he does have explosiveness in the open field. And what else did he say? He's got long speed. He's going to prove the doubters wrong. And I literally tweeted, I said back to him, I said, he's a top 3 kid in my class. Like, I wasn't even like, whatever. And he should be 1. I'm like, listen, man, he's not better than Justice Haynes. I don't know what you're telling me, but he's not better than Justice Haynes.
This is like baby Gronk's dad, bro. Jesus. Oh my goodness. No, that's actually super cool. I remember I watched some film of Owens, and I thought that he had some really unique lower half movement. Yeah. And that's what kind of got me on him. Just some stuff that I hadn't really seen from a lot of other players in recent years. I was like, wow, like just the way that he can kind of shift and bend his body on the lower half is quite amazing. So hopefully we can see something from him. But I will say that the father thing is kind of funny. It's definitely not always a bad thing, actually. I'm thinking of who am I thinking of? Brandon Lejeune, with like Roma Dunze's dad.
Oh my God, that dude, be careful. That goes all over the place.
I'm sure, but it's just cool that they made that connection and he got that interview with him, and Rome seems like a really cool kid. So I think that it's just cool. Like, the interactions are they can definitely they can go haywire, I'm sure. But it's kind of cool that you guys have those interactions and can connect with like the families and the players and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's you have to be like, so for me, I changed a lot of my terminology too. Like I don't ever say weaknesses anymore. I say like areas of improvement. I'm very cognitive.
Nice,
I'm very cognitive of like, I don't want to shit on these kids because I'm a 5'7" fat ass 34-year-old who definitely has never been at their level athlete. Right. Like, and I want to be very cognitive of like, what that, but you also need to do your job and you need to like, okay, this is, so I try to always emphasize like these guys can get better. If they don't get better, this is where I feel like he's ranked right now. But again, I hate like some things that I see that drive me crazy is like thumbnails of like bust. This kid's 18, 19, like that's frustrating to me because it's like, man, who knows what this kid's going to be. So like, I just try to keep it very like, this is what I see. I could be wrong. And that's where me and Ruben Owens, like I talked to him for like almost an hour. I was like, oh, this is what I see. And he sent me like clips of his kid and he's like, oh, look at this tape. And then look at this tape. And so like, we actually had a full blown conversation for like an hour. And it was great. But then like Rome's dad, he went after a few people in the space the other day. I saw it of like 17 tweets of like, you're an idiot. And like, you got to be very careful with like what you do and what you put out there. Like, you just got to be super, super careful about that. That's why I leave all my like stuff to the Discord, in our Discord. If I say something like that, I know that stuff's not getting out and it's like, it's not going to be spread over the internet.
I'm soon to be parent, so maybe I'll understand that level of protectiveness.
Oh yeah.
You will.
Soon, but at this moment,
it happens quick too.
Mind-boggling. Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, cool, man. I think you crushed the Devy stuff. Thank you for carrying the show while my stream just absolutely crapped itself. Yeah. Okay, so just a couple of news items here, and kind of can touch back to Devy, lead back to Devy a little bit. Just really hit on him real quick, and we'll get out of here with a quick dynasty trade. But we're hearing Kayshon Boutte, he was a Devy darling, right? This is the cautionary tale for sure of the Devy world, right? Kayshon Boutte gets drafted to the Patriots in the 6th round. This guy was former, probably first, second round pick in Devy drafts. And we're hearing that he's likely to be cut. So, or potentially not making the roster. Everything I've heard is that he ain't going to be there. So any thoughts on Boutte? Any, I guess, like, signals from that profile that we can look to, like, man, like what went wrong there? Anything like that?
So what I would say about Boutte, like, we were very cautious about him even last year. Like we were saying, hey, just understand where it comes from. I think two things happened with him. I think the injury was something more severe than what they ever told us. We still have not figured out what it is. I think it was a Lisfranc. I really do. I really feel like he had something with his foot and it wasn't there. Okay. And you know what? He's just lazy off the field. From all accounts, the kid just didn't put in the work. He fought with his coach. Yep. And I think the big thing is the red flags off the field. I think that's one thing, but that's the thing we'll never know. Like I'm not going to be able to be that beat reporter guy, like where I can tell you, hey, this guy doesn't understand defenses. Well, I'm not there. Right. So like, I think that's one big piece of the pie that we don't necessarily see. But when you start hearing reports of like off field stuff, he fought with Brian Kelly all last summer. He almost got kicked off the team. There is like, when you see a pattern, I think that's what you look for. Like, oh my gosh, like, and there have been kids like this. I don't know if you guys remember Damon DeMoss. He went to Texas A&M. He was the number one rated wide receiver, but then he got kicked off the team and, felony. Like, and so like when you're looking at that, I think that's one of those things you just have to be aware of and just you try to miss it. But also when you get new information, stop telling people to draft them in the 1st round, right? Like once the combine hit, I told all of our Discord guys, get out, like done. Don't draft this kid no matter what. If you're in the 3rd round, I probably would not. If it's the 4th, whatever, those picks don't really matter anyway. But like, if you're in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, like, so I think that's the one thing you could take away from it. If information is presented to you, don't keep telling people like, oh yeah, you should draft him. Like I still saw him going in like the 2nd round, even after the draft. There were people after the draft still taking him in the 2nd round. It's like, nah, you got to adjust that information.
Yep. I think there was some signs there for sure that we probably ignored because of upside and LSU and all that kind of stuff. But okay, one more here. And I know this is Uriah's guy, and he's apparently that guy. He's that guy per Derwin James, Quentin Johnson. Any concerns from your end on this player? I know he's a very polarizing player in the dynasty community and rookie drafts and the whole nine. How do you feel about Quentin Johnston? You agree with German?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a dynasty perspective, you have to love someone getting tied to Justin Herbert, right? Like, I think it really
Absolutely.
comes down as simple as this. Quentin Johnston could be the wide receiver one as soon as next year for Justin Herbert. What else do you want? You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the point. Like, Jordan Addison is nice, but he's got Kirk Cousins, and maybe who knows next year? Like, where does that kind of come from his dynasty outlook? And those two guys kind of get paired together. I think Quentin's going to be fine. I think Mike Williams is going to get injured, like he always gets injured. You're going to step up. And he's gonna get the targets and the target share. But yeah, I think Quentin Johnston's gonna be just fine. I think that he can go up and he can be that guy for them in that offense. And I've never really been like down or high. I really 107, 108 was a perfect spot for him in terms of evaluations, in my opinion. And now that he's tied to Herbert, what's not to like? Like, you're not talking about a guy that gets tied to a quarterback that you're not, and then also he didn't go to a wide receiver room that has a lot of dudes. They got a lot of like, Keenan Allen, he missed 7 games last year with a hamstring, and those hamstrings, they come back on you. Mike's missed. I don't think Mike's been healthy his entire career. I don't think that. I think 13 games is his most career games played in a season. Josh Palmer, no, stop it. Right. Like,
thank you.
To me, Quentin Johnston's the dude in that offense that can take off, especially with Herbert. So yeah, I think he fell in a perfect spot for himself.
Excellent. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. So that's the whole reason we had you on.
Just to tell me what I wanted to hear about Quentin Johnston. Yeah. I as soon as he got drafted to the Chargers, for me, and I wasn't super high on this profile from a film perspective, but you kind of look at it in its entirety, and what you said, yeah, it's hard to kind of go the other way with it unless you're just being a hater and saying he can't catch the ball when he probably can. So yeah.
With his hands. Yeah.
I think we're okay. I think we're okay. I'll tell you what, some of the camp stuff you've seen, the kid can catch. I mean, he goes up and gets it. So I think he's heard the haters and he's going to try to show out. So I like it. All right. So we have one dynasty trade here. Is this you, Uriah?
Yeah, it's a non-trade, but so like just kind of going back of trying to practice what we preached last week when we did the redraft ADP versus dynasty ADP. What we tried to do, Kevin, was just like we're looking at we did this last year and the year before, just kind of look at like where redraft ADP differs from dynasty ADP, and noticing that the people who played redraft, they don't really care about age, future production. They just want points this year. So we're trying to base that episode off of contenders' point of view, and we kind of highlighted some guys that I think were fairly cheap that you get for contenders that the redraft community was drafted way higher than the dynasty community, which makes you think you go out and get them cheap and then add some points to your roster. And so in doing that, I was going out to try to get Tyler Lockett. Turns out Tyler Lockett is a hell of a lot more expensive than I thought he was, even though he's 30. So I went and I found a manager in one of my leagues who looks like he's kind of going for younger players. He happened to have Lockett on his team. I'm like, it doesn't really fit his team, and Kendra Miller doesn't really fit my team. I drafted him because it was there for value, and so I sent out the offer for Kendra Miller, Lockett in a second, and it was rejected. Is there any world where you would take either of these sides, or how do you feel about it?
Oh man, that's a trade right there. I'd probably take Kendra Miller, right? Like, I feel like if
really?
Wow.
Okay.
I think it
that's
to
interesting.
me. I think it really definitely depends on roster construction where it comes from. But like in that context, I think Lockett's a depreciating value after this year. I think, yeah, you're right. I think he can kind of, I think he can step up maybe this year. And you'd be happy with that production. The second's okay. Like, I like that second in there. Miller, though, I think Miller's getting undervalued right now because I do think that he could take over next year and be that running back one in that offense. I know Jamal's there, but they can get out of there. I'd probably lean Miller, but I don't mind it from the other side either. Like, if you're a contender, now I bet you that probably get accepted if you probably put a third, lock it in a third for Kendra Miller, but you probably wouldn't want to do that because I do understand why trying to get back that second and just,
That's kind of the whole point. Like, I mean, I'm perfectly fine having Kendra Miller on my taxi and just seeing what happens to, blossom. But, I was trying to just add a couple extra points to my roster this year with a guy like Lockett, which I thought a guy who has kind of a younger team would want to get out on. And then maybe I could try to snag a second. Yeah, I wouldn't be interested in doing this deal if it was a third back. I just keep Kendra. So
that's very interesting. I must be entirely too low on Kendra, and I always have been. That's for sure. Just I I see why you'd like him in general. Like, watching his game, I see why people like him from a film perspective, but I just didn't. There was just part of it is like I think he has a really narrow gate. I don't really love that with running backs. I also just didn't think he was amazing between the tackles, the pass catching, and all that stuff. But he's in a great spot. So I see that. This is just an interesting one. I think I'd be really apt to take Lockett in the second and try to find another guy like Kendre maybe next year in that second round, because that's kind of where he's going, early second round. So yeah, but that's an interesting one. Clearly it's a lot more even than I was thinking. So that's a good one to go over. I like it.
Excellent. Of course, the response was, and the value is not even close. So I'm like, all right, dude, it's cool. It's cool. I'll keep moving down the list.
Here we are, very, very split on this trade. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Very cool. You know, everybody's values are different.
Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'm good.
Jonathan, Kevin, you want to go ahead and plug all that you do?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. You can just find my work at Football Guys for the Dynasty kind of content. And we have a college football show. It releases every Thursday. We've been doing Dynasty all summer though. So if you want to dive into Dynasty content, we can't talk about like the Pac-12 in June. No one will listen. So we've been doing we've been doing a bunch of Dynasty stuff. We're running through the depth charts now. So we're going through depth charts and looking at Dynasty outlook for all of these guys. And then also, if you are interested in Devy and you like combined rankings, so we have Caleb Williams in our quarterback combined rankings with everybody in NFL, so you can appropriate trade value. We have that on our Patreon, plus the manifesto, plus the Discord, plus a weekly podcast show for $3 a month. It's really not that expensive. I know everybody has that. We also have a year-long option where you pay for 10 months up front, so it's only $30 for the year. And it's something to kind of look into if you like that thing. But we have a bunch of free content on YouTube. Go check it out. It's at the Devy Royale.
Awesome. It's great stuff. You do great work, man. All you guys do great work. So yeah, definitely go check out what they got going on. Cool.
Thanks everyone for giving us a listen to this week's episode of Dynasty Underdog. Be sure to check us out on Spotify. Follow us on Twitter, Dynasty Underdog, at Uriah Dawkins, at Willie Beeman DFF, and give our guest a shout out on Twitter at @theboys_22. Have a good night, guys.
Later.